But when it comes to abusing any drug or any substance, our bodies are made differently.
Okay.
So when your friend or colleague is able to down their 6 beers every day and they don't seem to be affected, they're not having any problems. It does not mean when you take the same amount, you're going to be fine. So I hear a lot of times, especially with young people, they'll tell you, like, why do you think marijuana is a problem? Like weed. Because it is there. It has always been there. Even when I said, my grandfather used to take marijuana, so why are you saying it's a problem?
Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to yet another new episode of Here We Talk, where we talk about all the things that affect the day-to-day life of our living. And as we know that our motto here is to give awareness of the things that affect our emotional being, our mental being, everything holistically, including the spiritual being of a person. So today I have an interesting topic that we're going to talk about, and I've brought another professional who's going to help us in unpacking the pandemic that we are facing, not only as the world, but as Zimbabwe at large. So today I have with me Dr. Rukudzo, who is the mind doctor. Welcome to Here We Talk, Doctor, and I'm so grateful to have you today. How are you?
Thank you, Shannon. I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me on the episode.
Thank you so much. Maybe just having an icebreaker. What is the thing that you probably would do every single day and maybe not think about it, but then you just find yourself doing it?
Oh, wow. I know it sounds like a simple question, but it's not that simple.
Okay.
What are the things I do? I think for me, I've been on this small journey of trying to be mindful about things.
Okay.
So now it's a sort of become a bit of a routine for me, where I find myself gazing at little things. Like today I was just walking in the office and we have these nice peons blooming on. I was like, oh, I should take a moment to just look at these, and so that I can also be mindful. It's like the same way that I talk about it for other people, for my patients. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I'm also a person who is learning to be mindful, to take that all in, even if it's a small thing. I also am making it an intention to maybe also do that. Then out of curiosity, what made you to feature in the psychiatry department when it comes to your career?
Oh yeah. So it's not always that people know what they want to do in life, and it's okay not to know.
True.
So I think so I'm a psychiatrist, and for you to be a psychiatrist, at least in our training in Zimbabwe, you have to be a medical doctor first.
Okay.
And you then, during your internship, you then rotate through the different specialties of medicine. And I think for me, it was going through those different specialties that I started realizing what it meant to be a surgeon, what it meant to be an internal medicine physician, what it meant to be a pediatrician. And as I was rotating those, it was easier for me to say, no, I'm not cut out for being a surgeon. I'm not going to be cutting people who are quiet, and I'm not talking to them. So that left me with, the specialties where I was sitting down talking to people. I wasn't really clear about why it is I was interested in things like internal medicine, where I used to talk to patients or pediatrics. But when I went through my psychiatry rotation, it made sense that in all that it was about connecting with people, being able to holistically manage a patient, to include their social circumstances in whatever treatment plan, which is something I thought somewhat late in the other specialties, because we just looked at someone as their disease, the disease that we were treating them for, and not necessarily, the bigger picture of what a person. And I think psychiatry in general, mental health embodies all those things. You look at a person's social circumstances, their spirituality is important, and everything to do with it. So that's how I ended up in psychiatry.
Interesting. I'm also just picturing how you would go from every department and then having the one you would say, yes, I think I've arrived. Is that fulfilling for you?
It is, but obviously, as you start any journey, it's not always that clear.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, maybe for younger people, like it's okay not to know. Sometimes the doubts are always there, and if you notice how the mental health field has evolved, for example, after COVID, it has become a bit, a highlight, and it makes you realize, oh, probably my career choice wasn't such a bad choice. But initially, back then in the day when I went into the field, there were very few psychiatrists in the country, and I think each and one of them sort of remember a point in time where I was sitting them down, asking them about their career, so what will be my future in psychiatry if I also become a psychiatrist? It is something I should be getting into. It's going to be fulfilling. So it's not always clear, but I think with each day there are moments definitely that make you realize that, oh yeah, this was a good choice for me, because there are some very satisfying moments within the profession where somebody comes back after, a whole long treatment, and you see them back together with their family, they're able to go to work, their functionality is restored and all. So it can also be very, very fulfilling, and that feeling has grown even better over the years.
Okay, that was quite a full description that even helps us to understand exactly, this journey of yours to be the psychiatrist and the mind doctor. I'm assuming that's where it came from. And I think also we should normalize having that put out there, because when people hear psychiatrist, they associate it with, going insane, you're crazy in the mind. But when we put it as a mind doctor, it's just like any other doctor where, they take care of your heart, they take care of, your sugar levels, and the mind needs someone like you to take care of it as well. All right, so maybe also just for information, I noticed also in the line of the mental health, even as we deal about the issues of the mind and the emotions, things around that, we do not have quite much information of where do you start off when you need to be seen by someone in terms of your mind. Do we have more like a hierarchy in Zimbabwe, just like how other doctors will do that? You go for a GP first, then they refer you to a specialist, then you go. How is it that you probably get a patient?
All right. So I think your question goes around what are the steps? Who do I, when I'm looking for help, who do I reach out to? It can be quite difficult, because sometimes, a patient or a client does not know who, what a psychologist does, for example, what a psychiatrist does, and should I be going straight to a psychiatrist, should I be going to a psychologist? But maybe the short answer to that is asking for help starts from the very most lowest level, which is within your friends, within your family, right? Because many a times, because of the stigma around mental health, people are not going to tell you that I myself have sought for help before, and I have been treated, and this was my journey. I went to see a nurse, I went to see this person. But if you are comfortable with reaching out even to the people within your circle who might be non-professionals, they might be able to tell you or point you in the right direction. Secondly, any other professional generally has some knowledge of mental health, whether it is a nurse at your local clinic, whether it is in private practice, it is your doctor. They have some knowledge of managing mental illnesses. So you should be comfortable to be able to say with your GP, oh yeah, I'm feeling this, but I've also been going through these things in my life. They can be able to say, oh, these are the things that I can manage, but I think this requires you to sit down, talk to a therapist or a psychologist, or like, oh no, I think this one now requires some kind of assessment by a psychiatrist. So whether it is your nurse or your regular counselor, whether it is your general practitioner, can even be your gynecologist, because you're talking about, yes, that's where you go. And people are more comfortable with those doctors, so they go more regularly for those things, especially women. But it is also an opportunity. You should feel comfortable to talk about what you might perceive as unimportant social issues with them that might be distressing you, and they can point you in the right direction.
You know, I really loved the element of starting from the lowest way. I think when we cultivate good relationships with the people that are around us, then it makes it easier to, cry for help, and then you start from there. And I really also loved where you incorporated everyone into getting help. Then they will tell you, okay, maybe try this person, and maybe you might get the help that you need. Really appreciate that. Okay, getting into today's topic. We are having a pandemic in terms of drugs and substance abuse in Zimbabwe, where it's something that is affecting adolescents. Sometimes even kids are exposed to it. In the elderly, every other person, the youth. There's no one who's really secluded when it comes to this issue. And I was seeing statistics. I don't know if they are recent ones, but the one I saw, it was in 2023. They had said that 53% of women and 28% of men injected themselves with drugs, which is quite so high and steep. And this is almost a year ago. And now the situation seems also to be escalating. What has been your experience in the psychiatry field in terms of this drugs and substance abuse?
So I think when we talk about substance abuse, obviously that's a very loaded term, because when we talk about substances, sometimes people might not understand what we mean. So that's also drug abuse. And when we talk about drug abuse, people tend to assume that alcohol is not part of that.
True.
So sometimes I like to ensure that I break it down that it is alcohol and substance abuse.
Okay.
So that we know that is also included in this problem of abuse. And there are several drugs of abuse that we have seen people abuse, right? In itself, just taking alcohol, people will be like, oh, but I take 1 or 2 drinks. Is that abuse? And yes, there will be numbers where you're told, oh, if you take this much per week, then it is considered normal. But when it comes to abusing any drug or any substance, our bodies are made differently. So when your friend or colleague is able to down their 6 beers every day and they don't seem to be affected, they're not having any problems, it does not mean when you take the same amount you're going to be fine. So I hear a lot of times, especially with young people, they'll tell you like, why do you think marijuana is a problem? Like weed, because it is there. It has always been there. Even when I said, my grandfather used to take marijuana, so why are you saying it's a problem? But the question is about, it's you. He took it, he was fine. But it does not necessarily mean when you take it, you're going to be fine. So I've had experiences of people who come in at different levels of substance abuse. They come in with different drugs that they're abusing, from alcohol to things like marijuana or weed, or to the popular crystal meth, which is on the streets in Zimbabwe, or things like cough syrups, things like which come in as Bronclear, or things like lean. It can even be harder drugs like your cocaine, and all these things are available in Zimbabwe. How they are available is a story for another day, and how they come in. I've had experiences of having people who walk in voluntarily and say, no, I'm coming in because I want to just get off these medications. I've had experiences of people who have to be brought in by other people because they are so down in that journey that they are addicted, and they themselves are no longer able to see that they need help, but other people are. So there are definitely different ranges, and the experience is different with that. And managing those people has been also quite different. Their approaches to care, their approaches to treatment is different, and even the outcomes are also different.
I sitting here and listening to you already, has given me a picture of not going with what everyone else is doing, because then it's something that impacts me in a different way. And just because also people take those drugs and similar to be functioning from the outside as we see it, obviously there's damage that is happening inside, then we then think it's okay and normal that, I take drugs and function, so you take drugs can also function. And I love that you also brought up the issue of alcohol, because I think it's also a debate in so many conversations where someone even questions one glass of wine a day or unwind with the glass of wine, and how much is too much when it comes to all of that. So also maybe having to be in this field for this time, what has people who are on drugs have come also for crying out help for? Because I also believe that the use of drugs is also a sign of crying for help already. And I think that there are so many other issues that are behind that abuse. And I probably want that enlightenment to say, okay, these are the things that probably we need to look out for before the person then falls into crying out for help with the use of drugs.
Yeah, so I think you bring up what we usually talk about is the chicken egg scenario, because there is like a bi-directional relationship between substance use and a lot of mental illnesses.
Okay.
So you will find most of the times there's a coexistence between any substance abuse and another mental illness. A good example is like depression. So when one is depressed and they're sad, they're low and they're suffering from depression, sometimes they can use alcohol and substance use as a coping mechanism. So what started was the depression. They ended up taking something to cope with it. But because they're now taking this something, it's going to add on. It's either going to worsen the depression or it's going to bring up new symptoms like maybe psychosis, where people are hearing voices and seeing things, right? And then it keeps on being an ever-revolving cycle. Or it could be the opposite, like you start taking alcohol, you start taking a lot of it, and that actually induces you to start having depression, or you start having sleep problems. So now you have to keep taking more of the drug, and that's how the cycle of addiction then continues. So it's like a bi-directional relationship. Sometimes the substance use itself is the one that's causing you to have the depression or whatever other condition, or sometimes it is because someone was already suffering from depression, or maybe they were already suffering from a psychotic disorder where they're hearing voices, and whenever they take the alcohol or when they take the weed, those voices quieten down, so they use it as like self-medication. But it is not a good medication that they're using to treat the problem. So you find that's why an assessment with a professional is important, because not everyone who's abusing substances sits in the same category. There's someone who has an underlying mood disorder or depression or psychosis who's taking drugs, and maybe what they require first is for that underlying condition to be treated, and then we are able to deal with the substance use. Or it is just purely, just peer pressure, or I just used to drink socially, but somehow I lost control of the amount I was drinking, and I need to detox and rehabilitate, but I have no other underlying issues. But those two people are different.
Okay. No, I really did understand what you're saying, and I also think you've made a good point of looking at it in a different way and not really just generalizing the point of, it's only someone who takes drugs because there are things that are behind, but only it can start from the behind, then comes to the substance, or it can start with the substance and alcohol abuse, then into the mental illnesses. So maybe also just looking at life in general, where, pressures and so many things that are happening around, and one then like to get that numbness of whatever they're feeling or hide away from what they need to face, and then they probably start to want to resort to drugs, alcohol and substance abuse. What are the outlooks that we need to look out for as the support system or in our families, in our communities, to probably say that, or maybe this person maybe is going down this road, and maybe then reach out to them before it gets out of control?
Yeah, so when people take substances, like you said, there's like a vast array of different substances that people can take, and I think we have heard about some very absurd things, like people taking gel from diapers and abusing it because there is some chemical in those diapers.
Okay.
So it all depends. Some of the symptoms or signs depend on the type of substance that someone is taking. So with some substances, for example, with alcohol and the amount that you're taking, it's possible that if someone is taking 2-3 drinks, you're not going to see much. But there are times where they're going to come back home. It's either they're going to be just drunk, and when you say drunk, generally in society, people know what a drunk person looks like, right? But most of the times it's an issue of behavioral changes. Okay. There is what we know as one person's normal. So we know Shannon as this. We know Shannon maybe as a quiet person. She's reserved, she's chilled, but all of a sudden she talks a lot. She looks happy, but not a normal happy. It's like she's too happy for herself, like the usual self. So any deviation, any change from what we know as this person's behavior or personality or their own characteristic can be a red flag. It can be a change in the way you relate with them, we talk to them. It can be a change in their sleep pattern. All of a sudden they don't have a need to sleep. They are so active at night because maybe they're on crystal meth and it gives you that high. You're like these bursts of energy and you don't feel like you need to sleep. Or all of a sudden they talk about, people who are following them, people who are out to harm them. Because when you take crystal meth, you start seeing things, you start hearing voices, and many a times you feel like people are following you. And then that's when people use the terms like apatoma and things like that, right? Yeah. So it all depends on the drug. When people take marijuana, for example, for most people it's used and there's a very calming effect. Okay. Or if they take Bronclia or any other cough syrup that contains codeine, you get this very calming effect. So that's why you get people saying "Monakastika." Okay. They just chilled. They're like they seem to be in their own world. They're just floating. They are too calm. Okay. And so they're out of it. And many times you will see a difference when the person is sober and when they are not sober. But there also comes a time where someone is so addicted that they don't have any sober moments. Okay. And now their behavior is always around seeking this drug. So they're leaving home every time in the morning because they need to go to the bar. They're drinking, spending more time. Their money is just being spent on drinking or whatever, getting that substance. You can even also tell with the circle of friends or people that they hang out with. They might neglect their normal or usual circle and only focus on the circle that they take those drugs with them. Okay. Yeah. So I know it's a lot and obviously different symptoms, but I think the major thing is about change and the change in behavior, personality, or characteristics, which is sort of related to the substance use that you can see.
Okay. I'm really taking it all in, and I think there are also parts that you have touched in other mental illnesses, I can say, or maybe that behavioral changes, because my dad was bipolar. But I don't know also if we could say he was also using alcohol, because there were times where he would really drink on the weekends, Monday to Friday he's sober, but then during those times he then probably starts to hallucinate, having that symptoms you were talking about, that someone is following me, someone is after me. So I'm just thinking about that. Would we also call a person who is in that, can I say episode or period, to be a victim of using alcohol as is abusing alcohol?
Yeah, I think it's not. I like that you share your story, and it's not always easy that people talk about their own stories or their own lives, or having to live with mental illness, and let alone having to have a parent who had any kind of mental illness. And that's quite brave, right? And yeah, so I just wanted to appreciate that.
Thank you so much, though.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So it's sometimes when you have, I know people don't want to medicalize everything, and sometimes people want to take a step back from that. But the reason why mental illnesses are not, it's not psychic in the sense that, it's not something that we can't touch. And why it is in a science field is because just like the way your heart is an organ that actually functions, we know how it works. It works depending on some electrical activity or some chemicals. The same way we know how your liver works and how it functions and the blood flows in it. The brain is also an organ. And sometimes people want to run away from that fact and want to explain away symptoms. And that's why it is harder for people to look at things like substance abuse or even any mental illness is a medical condition. So alcohol is a chemical. It is going to act on your brain. It is going to change your chemical imbalance. That's how it is. So it's going to change the way in which your brain is functioning. Any other substance is going to do the same. So it can be that you already have the example that you gave of your dad. Here's another condition, bipolar disorder. So the bipolar disorder in itself has its own symptoms. For example, things like, oh, you have risky behavior. And maybe one of his risky behaviors was trying on different drugs. So it can be a symptom on its own. That a person who usually doesn't take drugs at any other time, when they are having a manic episode of the bipolar, they start having risky behavior, which includes taking drugs. But what it means is just the bipolar disorder in itself. It means there is some dysfunction at the level of the brain. And when we add on substance abuse, we are worsening that dysfunction. So that's where, the chicken egg scenario comes in, or that complex relationship I was talking about comes in. The abuse is there, the condition is also there, but the symptoms that they usually present with can be a bit difficult or complex because we are mixing two different things. There is dysfunction at the level of the brain that is being brought up by the bipolar disorder. There's also a dysfunction that's coming in because you've added a chemical to it. So yes, people who have underlying mental conditions can also abuse substances and they can also have similar symptoms. But the other important thing to know is if you have an already existing mental illness, it is more important not to abuse substances because your response to them is bound to be different. So you're likely going to have more symptoms, more intense symptoms of that substance or alcohol abuse than a person who doesn't have that.
Okay. I think you've also answered a question which I was also going to ask, where you're saying that, there are other underlying issues that may be which will be probably triggered also with the effects of using the substance and alcohol. Because I've always had the question of then why the violence also when someone is under the influence of, the drugs and the substance. So can we link it to that, effect of the substance on the brain function and the behavior also that is coming out when we talk about the violence with the people who are abusing?
Yeah, because, everything that we do, literally everything that our body is able to do, for us to be able to talk now, for me to be able to move my hands, it is all controlled at the level of the brain. And the other organs act based on those instructions that are coming from there. So depending on what the drug or the chemical that you have taken does, we talked about drugs that can have a calming effect, and then there are drugs that can have a stimulating effect, right? So if you take a drug that has an overstimulating effect, it goes and works on the areas of the brain to do with, for example, with behavior. Or, we have areas of the brain, particularly on the front of the brain and the frontal lobe, it works as a little leash. When you have a dog on a leash, you are able to control it. Sometimes you're able to pull the dog like, no, you don't go there, you stop here. But sometimes when you take alcohol, for example, it's like we've taken the leash away. So now this little dog is just running wild and doing. So that's why you find people are able to say things that they ordinarily wouldn't have said if they were not drunk or if they were not high, because that little mechanism of being able to filter things to say or not to say is no longer there because of this chemical.
That explains a lot, even outside of the abusing, but that says a lot about even having any kind of chemical that gets inside our body in the end shifts a lot of things and remove that mechanism of, filtering things that are not supposed to be out there. It says a lot. And yeah, I think this is so important that it can also help us to understand certain behaviors and certain things that we put inside of our bodies, what they actually would do, not only to our health conditions, but to our behaviors and how we're going to relate with other people in our environment. So Doc, we've talked about much of, this issue of what people do, the drugs that they use, and we have a scenario that I think in most homes, there probably will be a person who is already abusing this. How best can we help this person in our home, in our communities? What is it that we can do at the family level? Because I also understand it's not everyone who's able to bring their relative or their loved one to get this kind of help from you. But I know we need to get to that point because obviously we would not be equipped enough to help that person. But what can we do from the family setup when we have a person like that?
I think sometimes accepting that managing and living with someone who's got any kind of substance abuse is difficult.
Okay.
Is a very important first step. And recovering, I think if you see, there are lots of different programs that people go through. And I think, some people have only seen this in the movies, but like even here in Zimbabwe, we do have like things like Alcoholic Anonymous, AA, or Narcotics Anonymous, which work as a group support and works on a two-step program. But one of the things that they talk about is, when you have joined the program, you always say like, oh, I am on day 100, I am on day 400, I am a recovering addict. So you are on a recovery addict, probably on a recovery journey for the rest of your life. So even as family members, to realize that just because we took someone to see a therapist once who talked to them the importance of stopping the drug is not going to fix everything. And I've seen a lot of people spend lots of money to get someone into rehab, and they're like, oh no, we are only able to get them into rehab for like a week or 2 weeks. But it doesn't sort out these issues, and it goes back to the conversation we had earlier about what came first. There are so many things, so many underlying things. If I do not have a job and I'm constantly feeling low, that I am not useful, I am not helpful in any way, even if I stop drinking, that is still going to be stuck with me. If I go back home and I still don't have a job, I'm still going to be stressed about it. And I have not built up any other coping mechanism. I'm going to go back to the substance. If I have strained relations at home and I have a problem with my partner, my husband or my wife, and we are constantly fighting and it is stressing me out, and drinking is sort of my gateway. If that is not resolved, then I'm still going to go back to that. It is not an excuse in any way, because sometimes people then look at it as an excuse that, oh, they have a choice not to drink or anything. But remember, we talked about the effects at brain level. There comes a time where someone has poor control on how much they can take, when they can take it. And that's why it is a medical condition to a greater extent. So I think number one, just understanding that, recovery is not easy. And there are so many, number two, that there are so many things that are part of that recovery journey. It is not just an issue of having someone speaking to an addict and telling them that they should stop. They can be, social issues that need to be resolved. There could be an underlying mental illness that this person has. It could be the complications of the drinking itself, where, it has now led to the depression, and now we also need to sort out the depression. It could be an issue of, other, financial issues that they're going through, which still need to be sorted out. And so just that patience from the family and support. And when you realize that it's not easy, it means even as family members, you need to find ways of ensuring that you also take care of yourself. Because I've seen a lot of people who end up having like caregiver fatigue, where they're tired, they're like, we've done everything that we can, because their expectations were, as soon as we take you for rehab, if you do your 1 week, 2 weeks, we expect that you're back on your feet and you're able to sort out things on your own. And then if that doesn't happen, they are dejected and they do not want to continue helping again. So it's more about the patience. It's not fair. It's not always easy. It's not always easy for everyone to just stop taking the drugs. Sometimes it's like, oh, they offer it and everybody is happy. Something happens 3 months down the line, a year down the line, and they relapse again. And just knowing that, if someone has been able to do it once, chances are they're able to do it again, and they're able to go with the drug.
I really appreciate you talking about also the caregiver, because I think we have seen it in the community where even people have given up because how tiresome it is, how also it's, have a toll on your own mental health, where you have expectations, oh, he's better or she's better, and then the next thing, you're going back again to wanting to having the rehab, the violence, or, the vandalization. So I really think it's an important element to encourage that. And I think they can also give themselves grace, because, it's not our full responsibility of making sure that this person recover. And at some point, I also need to look out for myself in as much as I want to support the person who is in the picture. Okay, Doc, maybe as we're just rounding up, what are the available treatments that we have in Zimbabwe when we have someone who's an addict and needs to recover?
Oh, wow. I guess it's a broad question in terms of treatments. I think we talked about who they can reach out to start with. And there are several levels. I'm big on my own self-care and, what people can do within their own communities, what they can do for themselves, what they can do within their community, what they can do within their family, right? And sometimes that's the start. And for many people, I guess, because, generally, majority of Zimbabweans are affiliated to some kind of religion. They go to some kind of church, And usually that's your starting point, just being, are you rooted, are you planted in something, a community that you can also be accountable to. Because if you know that you are all part of the youth group at church, there is something that holds you back from doing certain behaviors. So it is also good to plant yourself in that. And even those small communities are also helpful, because many a times that comes free of charge. There is reaching out to, counselors, there is reaching out to psychologists, to therapists, and this is more for your talk therapy, right? Because sometimes it is harder to make decisions about either cutting down or actually stopping. But when you sit down and you plan with someone who helps you on your recovery journey, it can be easier. But there are also times where we admit that all the addiction, when it is, because of that level we talked about, where it controls the brain, there are times when you are no longer able to control it. The cravings are too much. You're not able to even control how much you take. When you try to stop, you start having some withdrawal effects, because that usually perpetuates addiction as well. That is where medication itself comes in, and those medications that any, like your psychiatrist is able to prescribe for you. But these things are not divorced from each other. Being on medication to help with cravings or relapsing is not divorced from you being in therapy. These things work hand in hand. I usually look at medication as being, if I give a metaphor of the boat, it is, the medication is going to stabilize your boat and keep it on top of the water. But for you to then move from one point of the river to the other part, you need to put in the work. And that's where therapy comes in, because you're going to learn, okay, what techniques am I going to put in place? If I see my friends drinking and it is something that I used to do with them, how am I going to resist that? So even in therapy, you sit down, you talk about it. You have these friends of yours. You're going to see them when you leave this place after rehab. How are you going to relate with them? You're going to have cravings, and it's going to make you want to join them again. How are you going to do it? People take for granted the smallest things. Sometimes you even need to recite the words you're going to say to them, because it requires strength, especially for men, because I think for drinking, for example, is regarded as, something that is manly to do, right? So all of a sudden you're hanging out with your friends, you're the only one holding a Fanta or a Coke, and everyone is drinking. People are bound to say things, and you might not be strong enough to say why you are not drinking, and it takes you back. So you need to go through therapy. That's what you discussed prior. You even practice it. You role play it until you're actually able to do it, right? So treatments out there, and people sometimes worry much about, in terms of where this treatment can be done. This can be done while you're going at home, but if you feel that, being at home is not a safe space for you, then it is better to be done, to have that going on while you're in a rehabilitation center. There aren't so much of that within the government system, but there are quite a number of private facilities that actually admit people for rehab, and you can get all those treatments being done within the rehab.
Okay. That was quite inclusive of, I think, most of the questions that I was going to go about in the end. We talk about the issues of accessibility of also those rehabs, and knowing that you can actually get medication, the treatment you talked about, when it's something that you can't control over at the end, then we can have those people in our homes, and we're also mindful to know that, this is an ongoing process. It's something that we also need to be patient. I think it's also a good thing to note to the people who are also abusing, that it is also a process of letting go of that habit of being an abuser. And I just want to thank you, Doc, also for this time that you've given us to talk about this issue. I hope it helps a lot of people, and I myself also have been helped, because there are other things that can blind us, even that frustration of, why is this person using drugs? They could rather do something better than doing this. But then there are so many things you unpicked. We have other mental issues that are already underneath that we don't know, which goes back to the issue of, I think and believe everyone should just go for therapy, just also so you know where you are and if you need help earlier, so that whatever issue you have can be solved before it creates another problem as well in the future. So I just want to thank you, Doc, for today. And maybe in closing, what do you do in your self-care time?
Oh, I try lots of things. Just being any other human being.
Okay.
People need, it's about intention.
Oh.
So at least, I know a little thing in the back of my head that tells me that I have to be intentional about it. And it's not always easy. So, sometimes when you see your friends are able to do their 5K, 21K marathon, it's pressure, right?
Yeah.
but it's not for everyone. So, when it comes to exercise, for example, I like to sneak it in and an exciting thing. So I would rather, just go, or like, oh, maybe let's go climbing, let's go to the bush up. But for me, it's like, oh, it's my exercise morning kind of thing, or maybe let me do it while I go for a swim or something like that. But I try lots of things because I also don't want to be bored doing exactly just one thing. So it's different things. It could be physical things, but I think above all, I love to travel. I love to explore new places, and that's something that actually excites me. It helps me to relax, and it's part of my self-care routine. I know it's not the cheapest self-care routine, but yeah, it is something that I do love. But it's not all. It always doesn't have to be like a budget break. So that's what I do for self-care.
I love that about you, and I think we also have almost the same taste of the traveling and exploring, and trying new things. Because then you also don't want to be like that boring person within yourself to be like, I'm doing this all the time. Maybe let me be curious and find out what this makes me feel. Okay, the last thing, what is the thing that you can tell to your client who is in recovery from the drug and substance abuse? What do you probably would say to that client?
Biggest thing is always you're doing well. You're doing great. If you are already in a recovery journey, it means there is some work you have put in. And I think we take it for granted. And I think you asked the question about what families can do for people who are on a recovery journey. Let's recognize the small efforts that people do. I try to recognize the small efforts that my clients do towards their recovery journey. It's not always a success, whatever effort, but if there is any little effort, if they were drinking 6 bottles every day and they cut down to 4 bottles every day, we applaud that success. So it's like you're doing well and keep on doing. You have to be doing something, like, keep moving. So just keep going. One day you will reach where you say, oh yes, I did it. I have been sober for this long. And you can keep counting the days.
That is a very important element, I think, even in any kind of aspect of our lives, to recognize that small effort. And I love that you also put that into your practice when it comes to your clients. And Doc, I just want to take this time to thank you so much for this time you've given us and our viewers, that we get this information to everyone. It helps us also to know what we are dealing with in our communities and families, or the things that we need to look out for, and even the awareness of reducing that stigma that we have around people who are also having the challenges of mental health and also the effects of using substance and alcohol. And I just want to tell you that you're doing great. You're doing well. Wherever you are doing great. Just as the Mind Doctor has said, you are doing great. So until next time, it is goodbye for now from me, Shannon, and Dr. Kuzo, who is the Mind Doctor. We'll see you next week.